What up, all my fight fans? So, now that we're kind of fresh off the whole White House event that took place last weekend for the UFC 250, when again, what a great event it was. Spectacular. Again, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It was all around, top to bottom, one of the best fight cards I've ever seen. On paper, it really wasn't. But it turned out to be really, really great. We all were a little disappointed at some of the fights that were announced, but they all turned out to be very, very awesome. But nonetheless, with that being said, the viewership came out, and it turns out that the viewership says that it peaked at 7 million, I believe. I believe it was like close to 12 worldwide, if I'm correct, but I believe it said 7 US in the US, and I think it went up to 12 worldwide, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know. I don't know 100% facts. I know that it's been reported. That's what the numbers are. So I know a lot of people are pretty much going to be stating different opinions. Like, I know Netflix is stating that they got 17 million back in their event that took place last month with Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano. So we got to figure out who's telling the truth and whatnot. Like, I know people are going to defend the UFC. I know people are going to defend Netflix. But at the end of the day, you know what, guys? What I say is it's all around great numbers. It's all around great numbers. Like, these guys are blowing it out of the park with numbers. Netflix did great. The White House did great. I was very fun. I was very excited. I was very happy to see the event. I was very excited to see the event on Netflix. So it's like, I don't understand this whole beef that's going on between them. At the end of the day, I love it. Competition is what's great. Competition is what drives everybody. Competition is what's getting these guys out of bed. And I'm talking about the heads, like the UFC and Netflix MVP. Because these guys are trying to challenge each other. These guys are trying to one-up each other. For the longest time, when UFC wasn't really trying, when UFC wasn't trying to do their best to give us the biggest shows, to give us the biggest names, and to give us, the best fights, is because they had no competition. They could give you any kind of fight they want to give you because, again, who are they competing against? Nobody. Nobody's doing any kind of numbers. They are not competing against no other MMA promotion other than your basic amateur promotions. So it's like, yeah, why am I going to give you these big events now that UFC is doing big events? Because Netflix, you got Jake Paul doing some big events. Now, is Jake Paul going to do all kinds of crazy numbers all the time? No, they're never going to beat UFC. That's what some of these UFC guys that love to defend the UFC, I get it. That's what makes you money. That's what puts your kids through college and feeds your family and whatnot. So I 100% understand where you're coming from on why you want to defend the job that's been taking care of you all these years. But at the end of the day, UFC is never going to go anywhere. UFC is never going to go out of business. UFC is never going to shut their doors. But they are going to be second place every now and then because, yeah, there are some times where other promotions have good enough money to put on big enough stars and to, give us some fights that the UFC did not give us, did not want to give us. Like, I get it. You got to look at both standpoints that, there's some fights out there that we never got to see that the UFC, their pride or maybe their ego just did not want to have it take place. Like Fedor and Brock, like Fedor and Randy Couture, like GSP and Anderson Silva. Like, there's just so many fights. GSP and Khabib. There's so many big blockbuster fights that we did not get to see that we should be able to see. Like Francis Ngannou versus either Tom Aspinall, Alex Pereira, or John Jones. There's all these egos, all these people that are trying to be chiefs, not enough Indians, and they're all trying to be the biggest dog in the yard. And that's what's making us lose the fights that we want to see. Because at the end of the day, this competition is great for business, but at the end of the day, if we do not have another promotion that helps give us the fights that we want to see, that we don't get to see in any promotion, it could be like, just say for example, it could be Strikeforce, Pride, Elite XC, any of these fights that they did not put on, the UFC did great, or vice versa. So that's what we want. As fight fans, we want to see the fights that we really, really want to see. That's all we really, truly care about. We don't care about one promotion going out of business. We do not care about whether or not the UFC stays and whatnot. We do not care about if Netflix even goes out of business. We just want to see great fights. We always want to see the fights we really, really want to see. We want to see the fights we want to pay for. Now that it's free, it's different. We're not paying for pay-per-view, which is great. Because some of the fight cards is like, I am not paying $80 to see this. This is not happening. So, but be that as it may, UFC White House, they try to do big numbers. They didn't quite get the big numbers. Now, why did not they get the big numbers that we all thought they were going to get? Well, honestly, because at the end of the day, yes, Ilia Topuria is a star. Sean O'Malley is a star. There's a few other little bit of a stars on there. Michael Chandler has a little bit of a name. Justin Gaethje has a name. You know, Alex Pereira is a star. But they're not Conor McGregor and they're not John Jones. You know, they're not Ronda Rousey. They're not Brock Lesnar. These guys are lifetime stars. Big stars that bring in big numbers. Not the Conor McGregor, Max Holloway. I feel like that's going to do big numbers. I feel like that's going to even be bigger than the White House because of the name, Conor McGregor. You know, so I think the biggest reason why the White House did is because of curiosity. The curiosity is like, oh my God, let's see how this takes place. Let me see the structure. Let me see the production. Let me see the design. This is where where Dana White, you know, where he comes and it's like, oh, well, you know, the production team, his team behind the scenes, where a lot of them were talking about, you know, why UFC pays and the biggest things because he has to share the money with all these other, you know, production teams and whatnot. This is where they came into play, and you know what? It was phenomenal. The production was phenomenal. You know, I feel like the production was on the exact same level as the fighters. You know, I've always said, like, if the fighters weren't there, there would not be no show. Well, this one I felt like could have done great without the fighters because I'm not saying the fighters were pointless. I'm not saying the fighters were not in use, but no, the fighters were definitely needed very, very much. But the production was just so phenomenal with the Bald Eagle, with the troops, with the singing, with the band, everything from top to bottom, the way it was designed, the way it was filmed, everything was just top to bottom was just so amazing. And I think that's why it did the biggest numbers. Because again, the fights on paper did deliver, but we did not think they were going to deliver at that time. A lot of them seemed like they were just going to be completely one-sided, which some of them were, but the two main events, or the co-main event and the main event, you know, end up being a little bit of a surprise, especially the main event. So, but if you did put John Jones on there against Tom Aspinall, if you did put Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway right now, or John Jones versus Alex Pereira, you know, if you put any of those fights on there, I guarantee you the numbers would have did a little bit better. But because those stars are not quite there, the numbers did not do quite as good. Now, yes, as far as we see, we cannot say, oh, because I know what some of the other promotions are going to, or not promotions, the other podcasters are going to say, you know, they want Netflix to prove that they did those numbers. They're going to want proof. 100%. We're just going to go based on what they said because we're never going to get that proof. We're never going to know what really, truly Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather did, Manny Pacquiao, Conor McGregor did, Conor McGregor versus Khabib did. We cannot go, well, Dana White's telling the truth, but Netflix is not. Or Netflix is telling the truth, but Dana White is not. Like, no, if they're going to say these are the numbers, or if we're going to get reports from other sources that these are the numbers that we're going to get, then we're just going to have to believe that. And so far, yes, Netflix did a little bit better than the White House. And that's not saying, again, that one promotion is better than the other. It's just showing, like, hey, maybe somehow, some way, we need to get the fights that we need to see. You know, they did not give us the fights that we quite want to see at the White House, but they still delivered. You know, and yeah, we got Nate Diaz versus Mike Perry. No, it wasn't the greatest. Gina Carano versus Ronda Rousey. No, it wasn't the greatest. And neither was Francis Ngannou, wasn't the greatest. Now, the after effect, you know, because if you look at it, the White House did way better when it came to the fights. You know, but the name status did way better on Netflix. So it's just a little bit hit and miss. It's a little bit hit and miss. You know, you gotta have both if you really are trying to do numbers, if you're really trying to be better than one another. But you just can't put random guys or any kind of guys against other stars. Ronda Rousey has always been a star. Ronda Rousey has actually, you know, kept her name in the limelight because remember, she was with the WWE for a while. If she wasn't with the WWE, I don't feel like the numbers would have been that great, you know, and then Francis Ngannou has always been not a big star, but somewhat of a big name, I should say. Nate Diaz, a big star for sure. So you put those three guys on there, of course they're going to do big numbers. You know, where pretty much that's the best way I can look at it. You got Nate Diaz, Francis Ngannou, and Ronda Rousey versus Ilia Topuria, Sean O'Malley, and Alex Pereira. You tell me, let's just say the fights didn't ever take place. The fights did not take place at all. 100%. We get these fights announced, and who are you going to see? You know, you got Nate Diaz, Francis Ngannou, and Ronda Rousey. And then you also on Netflix. Then you got another card. You got Sean O'Malley, Alex Pereira, Ilia Topuria. A lot of people might pick the Nate Diaz because, again, those are big stars. Those are like the guys that we really, really love to see. The other guys who are hardcore fans are going to want to see Alex Pereira, are going to want to see Ilia Topuria, you know, because those guys are the hardcores, and they're very exciting. Don't get me wrong. They're very, very exciting. I love seeing those fights. I mean, again, Alex Pereira is a great fighter. Ilia Topuria is a great fighter. Sean O'Malley is a great fighter. So, yeah, guys, at the end of the day, everybody wins. That's my personal opinion. I know it sounds like a peace talk. I know a lot of people want to hear that beef talk. I know a lot of people want to say Netflix is better. A lot of people want to say UFC is better. Like, no, I don't think anybody's better at this point. I feel like everybody did great. I feel like I want to see more of it. I want to see more Netflix. I want to see more stuff like the White House. I would love to see all of it, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think the UFC is kind of like it was a little bit of a bust for them, that they should have done bigger numbers, or are we satisfied and happy with the numbers that they did? Let me know in the comments, guys. Like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.